Good afternoon. This is Torah on Parshas Ve'era, the second parsha in Sefer Shmos. This parsha begins with Hashem, first of all, giving Moshe a bit of lecture for questioning Hashem's abilities to free the Jews from Egypt, because at the end of the last parsha, he said they made it worse by going to him, because Pharaoh put more labor on them, when even supplying with the material for the bricks that they were using to build the two store cities for the Pharaoh. And after that, and after establishing the heritage of Moshe and Aaron and their significance, Moshe goes to Egypt with Aaron to the Pharaoh, and first shows the thing with the snake. He throws down a serpent. The Egyptian magicians do it too. And however, their snakes get swallowed up by Moshe's snake. Now, there's a number of plagues here. I'm going to be illustrating the plagues through the plague of Barad, which is hail. It's, by the way, a very unique hail, which I'm going to explain in more detail. It's not the hail we see today, where you get frozen pellets effectively of ice. It's not snow, but that's all that's contained in it. This was one that operated against all principles of nature, because within the hail there was fire. Now, there's something very interesting. This is pointed out by the Novominsk Rebbe, among others, is that that if you look at the whole structure with which Hashem set up the universe, it's all dealing in tens. We see the 10 sayings with which Hashem created the world. There's the 10 tests of Abraham. There's the 10 plagues we were talking about now, and there's a Seros Bris, the 10 commandments that Hashem is going to give at Har Sinai. Now, this structure of 10, as he states, based on the Morale of Prague, is more than saying 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, and you get 10. It's in mathematics around the world. It represents something bigger, because every number is based on it. You go from 0 to 9. When you get to 10, you're moving to a new level of numbers. Now, therefore, what is the deeper meaning of this, that Hashem has replicated everything with tens, is that it constitutes a complete structure. Everything that is contained, for example, in the creation of the world, is in those 10 sayings. The 10 tests of Abraham, which raised the level of all Jewish people to truly be Hashem's people, same concept. Now, that also applies to the plagues. What were the plagues doing? This is explained by a number of people. One of them is Rab Abu Kutsera, Yaakov Abu Kutsera, who was a Kabbalist from the 1800s. In fact, his descendants of the Abu Kutsera family are still very significant rabbis. And that is the plagues in general. Now I'd like to go to the plague of Barad. Now, the plague of Barad has a few differences. Up to now, all of the plagues, if somebody wanted to, like the Egyptians who didn't believe in God, they could ascribe it to nature. First plague, okay, it's a little unusual, but all the water turns right into blood. There were explanations I've read where it's been tried to be explained away till today. Frogs, some kind of temporary spreading of frogs, and you could say the thing with the wild animals, the shkeen, and the other first six, you could explain them away as so-called natural occurrences. Obviously, they weren't. But if somebody was really skeptical, with the seventh plague, there was no question that it was a plague and that it was being administered to teach the Egyptians. And What was it trying to teach him? The Jewish people represent the forces of purity, the forces of taharos, of holiness, kedusha. The Egyptians represent the opposite. They were the center of all forces of klipot and spiritual impurities. The Yetzer Hara, the other side, which I'll be explaining in more depth next week when we get to Parshas Bo, and I'll be speaking about the 10th plague, plague of Malchus Makoros, the death of the firstborn sons. Um, so there is that significance too. But what is the difference with this plague? We have a unique hail. What kind of hail? Within the hail, there's fire. Now, fire and water, as we all know, don't mix. If you have an excess of fire, it can boil away the water. If you have an excess of water, it drowns out the fire. The two simply do not coexist in nature. So Hashem was trying to illustrate that there's a higher reality above him, above nature, that he was trying to prove here. And it also has another thing, as I'll explain. It gave the world free choice. If they truly wish, and they were given one day's warning to get their cattle and to get their everything and themselves inside, because the hail only destroyed people who are outside. So if they had that much belief in a God, they would be spared. If they didn't, now, if one looks at this one, and I'm quoting here Rav Nosson Shapira. You make more commonly known of him by his abbreviations of two of his books, Renash or the Rav Hanasiya. Those are his two, based on two of his books. And he looks at something else. He says, if you look at the gematria, every word, every letter in Hebrew has a numerical value assigned to it. And if you look at this, it says Barad Elohim. Elohim is the name of Hashem, that's strict justice. In fact, that's the name with which Hashem created the universe. We see it in Ma'aser Bereshis, the story of the creation. Now, he does a whole gematria exercise here, what's known as Rivia, where you take the spelling and you extend it by letters. For example, the word Elohim is spelled Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem. So how does he break it up? You first do the Aleph, then you extend it to the two letters, Aleph, Lamed, then Aleph, Lamed, Hey, finally Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, and finally spells the entire word Elohim. And what is the significance of that? That has the gematria of 206, of 200. Now, that still needs another 6 letters here. And what are the 6 letters? There's actually 5 letters left over. And there's these Heyotiot, and you combined, you add it as a 6th one. That gets you the word Barad, which has the gematria of 206 and makes up the difference. Now, what is also unusual about this is, in the terms of the spheros of Hashem, the qualities of Hashem, water, hail is water. That represents the quality of chesed, of kindness, and that was barad. That's from the side of chesed. Now, but also it has Aish in it. What does that represent? Strict justice. So you're having a mixture of fairness, of chesed, kindness to the Jewish people, because not one area, a Jew, was affected by the hail. The land of Goshen had great weather, was totally exempt from this. So we see that he was trying to show that Hashem can be merciful and at the same time administer justice. Excuse me, and even with the Egyptians, he was showing the same thing. How does he show the same thing? There is the Egyptians were given an opportunity to see his greatness and his power, and if they started to actually believe in it, they were spared. So even those that were punishing his people, he was willing to give a second opportunity to, and that's one meaning of it. Now, another meaning of this concept of water and hail and ash. Now, when Moshe is telling Pharaoh, warning the Egyptians, there's going to be barad, he doesn't mention the word ash. It's called, if you look in Haggadahs, it's called barad. It's not called barad ash. And as explained by the priest Sadok, it's teaching a very important lesson here, that the fire wasn't really for the Egyptians, it was for the Jews, not in a destructive sense. Why? Because what does fire represent? Fire represents uh, fire represents Torah. Now, how it is, that's a whole discussion itself, but it's saying that we're talking about the oral Torah, the Torah that wasn't written, because the words Avraham represented Aish in a positive sense. His words were like fire. That's one of the two ways Torah is mentioned. The other comparison is made to water. That again is a drush itself beyond this, the Var Torah. But we see, so therefore, the water, the ice, the damage for those who didn't avoid it, didn't listen to God. Moshe was God's warning through Moshe, got killed. Their livestock got killed. So what was the fire for? The Aish? The Aish was for the Jewish people, because we could feel the warmth of Hashem so much. His words of Torah, his justice. The Egyptians were totally blinded to that. So that was the purpose for Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. Why was fire also significant to the Egyptians, besides the destruction it wreaked? Was very simply, the Egypt represented the forces of impurity, and each one of the plagues destroyed part of the klipot and impurities of Egypt. So by the 10th plague, evil was not totally, but virtually wiped out in Egypt, which had been the most impure and most powerful center of impurity. And that is another understanding. Now, looking at the plague itself, one more final concept is this, that this plague is the sixth plague, is the seventh plague up. It's the final one being discussed in this parsha. Now, against that, there are the 10 things which Hashem, 10, Aseros Dibros, which the fourth of the Aseros Dibros, 10 commandments, is to keep the Shabbat. So what is the connection to Shabbat, and how is this a punishment of the Egyptians? As Rav Yaakov Abu Kutsera explains, in many places, including the Haggadah of Ultras Yaakov, it's explaining an important concept. When we get out of Egypt and Hashem gives us the commandment, it says, you shall stay in your tents. There'll be no man on the seventh day. You get the man you had from the sixth day, the double portion. You enjoy it. You spend time with your family in happiness and peace. The Egyptians who were keeping the Jews from leaving and were denying them that opportunity suffered meter keneged meter, measure against measure, because they were doing the opposite. They either, those who did try going out in defiance of Hashem's system, they were killed, and the animals were killed. Even those that stayed inside, they had to share their small houses with their cows chickens and every other creature that was there, as well as brought all of themselves into their residence. And therefore, not only didn't they enjoy Shabbat that was Mida K'neged Mida, because they were keeping us from leaving and serving Hashem and having Shabbat, they were wiped out. And that form of tumah of theirs was wiped out. What we should learn from all of this is that even though things often we can't fully understand their operation, we can see from this plague among the others how Hashem is operating the universe on a much higher level. Sometimes we can't understand, sometimes we can understand, which applies even down to the day. Whereas I'm recording this, there are all kinds of unusual events going on, both in the Middle East and beyond. I'd like to wish everybody a good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.